If I had known that one cup of coffee could burn away 65 years of dignity, I would have stayed in bed that morning. I was sitting quietly at the breakfast table in my daughter Lisa's sunny kitchen, cradling a warm mug in my hands. She had just made a fresh pot, too strong, the way her husband liked it. I thought it would be a quiet morning. I thought I was safe. Grandma, my grandson Travis said casually, like he was asking me to pass the butter. Can I borrow your credit card again? There's this thing I need for my gaming setup. It's only 5 grand. I didn't even flinch. I just said no. That's when Lisa snapped. She didn't yell right away. First, she let the silence crawl around us, thick and poisonous. Then, without warning, her hand flew toward me. Not to strike, no, she wasn't that bold, but she did something worse. She tipped my coffee mug straight into my lap, scalding hot. I gasped, leapt up, the ceramic hitting the floor and shattering. The liquid soaked into my thin pajama pants. My thighs stung, my dignity shriveled. Lisa didn't even blink. If you're going to be selfish, then maybe it's time you leave, she said, folding her arms like she was laying down some corporate policy. Either give Travis what he needs or find somewhere else to live. We're not running a charity, Mom. That word hit harder than the coffee. I stood there, dripping, burned, and silent, my eyes locked with hers. For a moment, I thought I saw a flicker of guilt, but no, it was calculation. I was being measured, weighed, and found inconvenient. $5,000, I repeated, my voice calm but trembling. For a child to buy gadgets. Lisa's lips curled. It's not a big deal. You've got money. You've been sitting on it ever since Dad died. I don't even know why you're being difficult. I've been paying for this house's utilities, I said softly, and I've never once asked you to cover my prescriptions. Her eyes rolled. You're lucky I let you stay here at all after your surgery. Remember? You couldn't even walk without help. I've been managing your whole life, and now this. I wanted to scream, not just from the pain but from the betrayal. They were never helping. They were positioning. Lisa's care came with strings, no, with ropes. Invisible at first, then tight, then cutting off circulation. In that moment, I understood this wasn't my daughter anymore. Not really. This was someone who saw me as leverage, a resource, a stubborn old woman who had outlived her usefulness. Behind her, Travis looked bored, still waiting, still expecting the card. My hands were shaking as I grabbed a paper towel and dabbed up my legs. No one moved to help me. My breath was shallow. My heart thudded in my ears. Lisa crossed her arms and added, with that same cruel smirk, you either hand over the card or be out of here by the end of the day. There it was, not a request, a threat. I looked down at the spilled coffee pooling around the broken mug. One of the pieces had landed near my foot, a jagged little shard with a floral print, a piece of something once beautiful. Just like me, I didn't argue. I didn't cry. I walked slowly to the sink, rinsed my burned hands under cold water, and turned off the tap. Then I spoke, I'll be gone before sunset. Lisa blinked. I think she expected more resistance, but what she didn't know, and what I finally remembered, was this. Quiet doesn't mean weak, and some debts are paid not with money but with silence and finality. The door clicked shut behind me, and I was alone in the guest room. My legs still stung, but the real pain wasn't from the coffee, it was from knowing that she meant it. She wanted me gone, not because she couldn't afford to keep me, but because I was no longer useful. I sat on the edge of the bed, my bed, the one I'd slept in after my hip replacement, the one Lisa had tucked me into every night at first, like I was still her mother, not her burden. She had insisted I stay with them, called it a temporary arrangement. I didn't argue. I was grateful, stupidly grateful. Now I could see it for what it was, a trap. She managed my prescriptions, grocery lists, and utilities for convenience, she said. She'd handle my banking so I could rest. She told the neighbors I was too tired to socialize when, in truth, she never even told me when they came around asking for me. And I let her. I let her help me right out of my own independence. I moved slowly to the closet. My suitcase was still on the top shelf, dusty but intact. I pulled it down carefully, clutching the edge of the dresser for balance. My hip ached, but I didn't wince. I didn't groan. Pain was familiar. What hurt more was that no one knocked, no one came to check on me. Lisa had screamed in the kitchen loud enough for the whole block to hear, and Travis had watched me flinch and freeze and fumble for words, but they didn't care, not enough to follow, not enough to soften the blow. I opened the top drawer and pulled out the envelope I had hidden there months ago beneath the spare linens. Copies of my birth certificate, insurance cards, a printout of my bank's routing number. I didn't fully know why I'd stashed them away at the time, but now it made sense. Some part of me had always known this moment would come. As I packed, I made no sound, no sobs, no muttering. I folded each piece of clothing with steady hands. I rolled up my jewelry pouch, just costume pieces and one pearl ring from my late husband, but it was mine. Mine. From the hallway, I heard the low hum of the television. Lisa was back to her usual routine, watching one of those home renovation shows she always claimed I wouldn't understand. Travis was probably in his room, headphones on, spending someone else's money online. I zipped the suitcase and sat back down just for a moment. My eyes scanned the room. The framed photo of Lisa and me at her college graduation still sat on the dresser. She'd insisted I be in that picture. I looked proud in it. I wasn't proud now. I was awake. The doorknob turned briefly, then it stopped. They heard me packing but didn't care enough to open it, or maybe they were hoping I'd disappear. I sat back, suitcase at my feet, heart pounding like I was in an ER again waiting for a diagnosis. But I already had one. I wasn't broken, I was discarded, and that meant I was free. I picked up my phone and scrolled down until I found the name I hadn't used in months. Gerald M. Retired attorney, my neighbor, once a friend, still kind. I hit call. He picked up on the second ring. "Ruth," he said, "everything all right?" "No," I said, my voice steady, "but it will be." It was quiet after I hung up with Gerald, too quiet. That awful buzzing kind of silence only exists in houses where love used to live. I sat back down, one hand resting on my suitcase, the other brushing the edge of the nightstand where my reading glasses usually sat. But I hadn't read in weeks, not since the last time I felt like a person in this house instead of inventory. That's when I noticed something. My purse. It was lighter than usual. I unzipped the front pocket, no wallet, no bank card, no ID. My heart skipped. I opened the second zipper, then the third, nothing. My fingers started to tremble as I sat down on the edge of the bed and dumped the contents out. Loose peppermints, tissues, an old lipstick, no card, no wallet, nothing. I'd had it yesterday. I was sure of it. I used it to buy my prescription ointment at the pharmacy. Lisa had driven me and insisted on holding my bag while I walked slower. I thought she was being kind. No, she was creating an opportunity. I could hear her voice now, months ago, so casual at the time. "Let me just take care of your bills, Mom. It's easier if everything goes through one account. I'll set up automatic payments. You don't have to worry about anything. You just focus on healing, okay?" So I let her. I handed over access, passwords, accounts. I trusted my daughter, and now I couldn't even remember the last time I saw a bank statement with my name on it. She had started having everything go paperless again to simplify. What a fool I'd been. The words came up in my throat like bile. They loved my money more than me. I wasn't family. I was a line item. I walked slowly to the dresser and opened the second drawer. I kept a small notebook in there, the kind I used to write grocery lists in when I lived alone. On the last page, I'd scribbled down my account numbers months ago, just in case. I stared at the numbers, familiar, mine, but when had I last seen the card that matched them? I checked the jewelry box, under the mattress, even inside my old Bible, nothing. They didn't just ask for my money, they took it. I sat back on the bed, dizzy. The sting of the coffee had faded. Now it was something colder burning inside me, a humiliation that tasted like rust in the back of my throat. And here's what made it worse. I had let it happen. I let her become my keeper. I told myself she was helping, that she was stepping up, but no, she was stepping in front of me, over me, around me. I hadn't seen it clearly until that moment. I was too tired to play, not when she intercepted calls from my bank, not when she started pre-approving my Amazon orders like I was a child. She'd been locking the doors gently, one by one, until I had nowhere else to go. That was the part that nearly made me cry. I wasn't weak. I had survived 30 years in the ER, the death of my husband, and a hip that broke like glass. But I had not survived this gracefully. I looked at the framed photo of Lisa and me again, the one at her graduation. She wore that same smug smile then too, back before I knew that some daughters don't grow up to love you back. They just grow up to use your shadow. The phone buzzed. It was Gerald. A text. "I'm outside. Ready when you are." I stared at the screen, then at the broken pieces of trust scattered invisibly across the room. I wasn't just leaving a house today. I was leaving the lie that I still mattered to her. By the time I opened the door, Gerald was already halfway up the walkway, a calm kind of urgency in his step. He wore his usual navy windbreaker and carried a sturdy canvas bag like we were just off for a picnic. He didn't ask questions. He didn't look me over like I was broken. He just said, "You ready?" I nodded. The house behind me was still quiet, no doors opening, no footsteps rushing to stop me. That silence, it was proof. Proof they thought I wouldn't leave, that I couldn't. Gerald picked up my suitcase and gently took the smaller tote from my shoulder. "You got everything?" he asked as we reached his car. "Everything I still own?" I said. He opened the passenger door. "Careful with your hip." That one sentence almost broke me, not because he was kind, but because I realized how long it had been since someone was kind without a receipt attached. The drive started in silence. I watched the streets blur past, each turn taking me further from the house that stopped being home the day Lisa started calculating my worth like it was a monthly bill. Halfway through town, Gerald finally spoke. "You know," he said, "I saw you crying last week." I blinked. "What?" He didn't look at me, just kept his eyes on the road. "On the balcony, you were sitting real still, holding that little ceramic bird." I didn't want to intrude. I didn't even remember the bird or crying. I guess I started then stopped. It felt like I was living in someone else's life, a smaller one. I figured something was wrong when I didn't see you at the library anymore. That was the moment I realized how far the isolation had gone. Lisa didn't just take my money. She took my routines, my friendships, my freedom to walk 2 blocks and drink bad coffee from a paper cup while gossiping with the retired choir ladies. She didn't lock me in a room. She just made the rest of the world harder to reach. "You're not the first I've helped like this," Gerald said quietly. "Old folks getting managed right out of their autonomy. It happens more than people want to admit." I said nothing. I couldn't because I was too busy holding my tears and like they were precious. Singers who'd missed their stop. "I made a few calls this morning." Gerald continued. "There's a place I think you'll like, a senior community with independent units." "You mentioned once you liked the one with the koi pond." I turned to look at him. "That place is too expensive." I saw the brochures before. Lisa said it wasn't realistic. "Lisa also said you needed help ordering your own socks," he said dryly. "Don't give her authority. She never earned that." It made me smile, barely. He reached into the side console and pulled out a slim manila envelope. "Start here, just some pamphlets. Oh, and we'll talk to a financial protection officer too. If what you're saying about the missing card is true, we may need to act sooner than later." I felt a thud in my chest, not panic, not even dread, just the sound of the truth landing where it finally belonged. "I didn't want it to come to this," I whispered. "She was my daughter." Gerald nodded, slowing the car as we approached a light. "And I'm sure you loved her well, but sometimes love is just the paper around the poison." I looked out the window. Somewhere behind me, Lisa might have noticed I was gone. Maybe not, but ahead of me, for the first time in a long time, I saw a gate opening, not a cage, a door. We pulled up to the gates just past 11 Golden Pines. That was the name. The sign was modest, no gold, no pine, just clean lettering on a weathered board. But the grounds beyond it looked like something out of a life I used to think belonged to other people. Hydrangeas in bloom, a shaded bench under a willow, a koi pond catching the sunlight like glass. Gerald parked and turned off the engine, letting the quiet sit. I stared at the entrance. "I'm not ready," I said softly. "For what?" he asked. "To want this." He didn't say anything, he just nodded. That was what I liked about Gerald. He never tried to fill silence with pity or pretty words. He knew some moments deserved space to breathe. We stepped into the main lobby, and that's when I realized something. The place smelled like lemon balm and fresh-baked rolls, not antiseptic, not sadness. It smelled like living. The receptionist, Leia, stood to greet us, kind and not too sweet. "You must be Ruth," she said. Gerald called ahead, said you'd be visiting today. "Welcome." I almost corrected her. Visiting sounded so permanent, but I didn't because something inside me whispered, "Let it be." We toured the courtyard first. Gerald walked slowly beside me, letting me set the pace. We passed a small library, a crafts room, even a yoga class for seniors. I watched two older women laugh as they struggled to roll up their mats, and it hit me they weren't being managed, they were living. Choosing. Every room had sunlight, every hallway had windows. No one looked over anyone's shoulder, no one asked for permission to go outside. When we reached the koi pond, I stopped. The fish glided under the surface, gentle and aimless, like they had nowhere urgent to be. "I used to sit by water like this when I needed to think," I said. "Before all of this." "You still do," Gerald replied. Ruth said we sat for a while. I didn't speak, I just existed. For the first time in months, I wasn't someone's problem to solve. I wasn't Lisa's headache, I wasn't Travis's wallet. I was just Ruth. When we finally went back inside, Leia led us to a quiet tea room and brought over a tray, 2 cups, a small plate of lemon cookies, a brochure. Nothing pushy, no speech, just a gentle offering. I held the cup in both hands, grateful for the warmth, and stared at the brochure. There in print was the thing Lisa had told me not to even consider: a studio with a kitchenette and balcony, month to month, no pressure, move-in ready. "Don't get your hopes up," Lisa had said. "Places like that are for rich retirees, not people like you." I read the number again. It wasn't cheap, but it wasn't impossible, not if I had what I used to have, access to my own accounts, a say in my own life. "I don't know if I can afford this," I said quietly, more to myself than anyone. Gerald took a sip of his tea. "Then let's find out. But first, you file the paperwork, a financial protection order." "I'll help." That word landed hard in my chest. Protection. Not because I was fragile, but because I was done pretending I didn't need protecting from my own daughter. I looked at the brochure one more time, then at Gerald. "Okay," I said. "Let's start." And just like that, I stepped into a new chapter, one with locks only I held the keys to. At Gerald's kitchen table, I spread out every document I had left to my name. Insurance cards, old bank statements, a folder marked Medicare that Lisa once laughed at for being so analog, and then a notepad, thin and yellow. Tear-streaked in places where I'd scribbled every suspicious moment I could remember. "I know it's messy," I said, "but I tried to keep track." Gerald adjusted his reading glasses. "Messy is fine, truth usually is." He flipped through the first few pages, nodding slowly. Recurring charges from stores you don't shop at, a Netflix profile named Travmaster, PayPal withdrawals at 3 a.m. "This is good, really good." I sat across from him, my hands folded, back straight. I didn't feel small anymore, just focused. I had something they didn't expect: evidence. The bank card had vanished, but my memory hadn't. And now that I was looking backward with clear eyes, the picture was coming into focus. Lisa had taken control under the guise of love, but it wasn't love, it was strategy. "Do you have access to a printer?" Gerald asked. I nodded. in Cliff's old study, still hooked up to the old Dell. Then tomorrow we'll scan these pages, he said. I'll connect you to a financial abuse specialist. They're discreet. They don't just handle bank reversals, they build protection cases. He paused. But we have to act soon. Once Lisa realizes you're not coming back, she might try to get ahead of this, especially if the accounts are still under her watch. They are, I said, at least some of them. But the title to the house? I trailed off. Yes. Gerald looked up. It's in my name. Lisa had it transferred before my surgery. She said it would help with hosp. I tall paperwork. Gerald blinked, then leaned back. You mean the house she's living in? Yes, he let out a breath that sounded almost like a laugh. Well, now that changes everything. He stood and reached for a small lockbox on the shelf behind him. Inside was a set of official-looking forms, tabs sticking out like teeth. You need to make copies of your documents. Every page get notarized statements. If you can list the exact dates Lisa made withdrawals, even better. I nodded, already reaching for my notepad again. My handwriting was shaky, but my memory was steady. Should I call her? I asked. Let her know I'm filing? No, Gerald said firmly. Let the paperwork speak. It'll say it better than you ever could. That line stayed with me. Let the paperwork speak. Let it carry all the words I wanted to scream but never dared. Let it bear witness to the years of quiet erasure, the theft wrapped in hugs, the smothering dressed up as care. Let it say what I couldn't. You tried to own me, but I kept the receipts. That night, I scanned every single page. I sorted folders until midnight. My back ached, my eyes stung, but I didn't stop because now I had a purpose bigger than survival. Now I had a case, and whether or not they ever apologized, the record would remain for the lawyers, for the courts, for me. Because I was finally putting it all on paper, the truth they never thought I'd live long enough to tell. Lisa didn't know I still had the title deed. She never asked, never thought to. She just assumed her temporary guardianship of my life had become permanent, like everything else she quietly claimed. So when she pulled into the driveway 2 days later and saw a stranger standing in her front yard with a clipboard, I imagine it felt like a glitch in her own system, the perfect order she'd built cracking. The stranger was a real estate agent, a woman named Carla. I'd spoken to her just yesterday, referred to me by Gerald's connections, professional, discreet, and not the type to gossip. Lisa stepped out of her car, furious already, I'm sure. I wasn't there. I was exactly where I needed to be, 3 towns over on the shaded balcony of my temporary apartment at Golden Pines, a glass of iced tea in one hand, and a signed property reassessment form in the other. Gerald had dropped it off that morning. I didn't need to be present for the storm, I just needed the paperwork to arrive first. Lisa called me, of course she did, 3 times in a row straight to voicemail. The 4th time I answered. Mom, what the hell is going on? There's a realtor here doing a walkthrough of my house. Your house? Whatever, she said. You ordered a valuation. I waited a full second before replying, correct. Silence, then venom. You're not serious. I'm very serious. I could practically hear her pacing. You don't even live here anymore. What is this? Some kind of guilt trip? Are you trying to embarrass me? No, I said plainly. I'm just reclaiming what was always mine. This is my home. She hissed, no. I said again, calm and absolute. It's the home you've been. In squatting and managing with money that was never yours, I let you play caretaker. That role is now revoked. You can't just throw us out. I didn't throw you out, Lisa. You told me to leave. The silence after that was like snowfall, soft but suffocating. She had no idea I remembered everything, how the deed had been transferred into my name under the guise of helping with medical paperwork, how I'd signed everything back then without reading closely, trusting her. But I did read one thing I remembered. I never gave her full power of attorney. So technically, legally, and morally, the house was mine, and now it was being reassessed, prepped for listing, protected from her. Lisa finally spoke again, low and icy. You're being cruel. I didn't argue. I didn't defend. Instead, I said the one sentence that silenced her completely. You only miss me now that I said no. I ended the call. Carla texted me half an hour later. Evaluation completed. Client Lisa attempted to interfere, but I remained professional. Strong potential for resale. We'll follow up tomorrow. Gerald called later too. She tried to call me, he said, left a voicemail full of threats. Let her threaten, I replied, because for the first time in a long time, I wasn't afraid of her anger. I wasn't even angry myself, not anymore. I was something scarier. Certain. Certain that love without respect is just possession. Certain that family means nothing when it's built on control. Certain that even if I had nothing left but this chair, this tea, and my name on a legal document, I would still be freer than I ever was in that house. That night, I went to bed early, and for the first time in years, I locked the door not because I feared what might come in, but because I finally had something worth keeping out. The front doors at Golden Pines are glass, heavy but elegant. You can see out, but no one gets in without being invited. That's why I didn't flinch when I saw Lisa coming. I was sitting in the community library that morning, reading an article on elder financial abuse Gerald had highlighted for me. My tea sat untouched beside me, too bitter, but the words on the page burned hotter anyway. Then the front desk rang my room. "There's Lisa here to see you," the receptionist said calmly. "Would you like us to bring her in?" "No," I said, "but you can let her know I'm watching." They didn't ask why. The staff here had seen this before, children showing up only when their names are on the line. Instead of the caller ID, I stepped quietly into the sunroom just to the side of the main lobby. From there, I could see everything without being seen. Lisa stood in the foyer, tight jeans and a fiery red blouse, pacing in small circles like a lioness trapped in a showroom. Her expression was pure disbelief, as if the air here had personally offended her. The receptionist approached her again. Lisa pointed in my direction, and I saw the gesture clear as day, accusatory, sharp. She didn't know I was behind the tinted glass. She didn't know that for once, she was the one. On the outside, I stepped back just enough to stay hidden. Not out of fear, but out of choice. It's a power people like Lisa never expect you to take back. Not the power to fight, but the power to ignore them. 10 minutes passed. Security arrived, not loud, not aggressive, just firm. A woman in a navy blazer and name tag approached and spoke calmly to Lisa, who by now was gesturing wildly. Her mouth moved faster than her sense of irony. I watched her point again toward the brochure's stand, the ceiling, maybe the air itself, anything but inward. Finally, she turned on her heel and stormed out. The doors glided closed behind her like punctuation. I returned to my seat in the library. The tea was cold now, but it didn't matter because I wasn't. Later that afternoon, Gerald stopped by. I told him what happened. "She came all this way just to be denied at the door," he said, shaking his head. "She must have expected a different version of you." "She expected the old version," I said, "the one who thought silence meant peace." He nodded slowly. "That version's gone." We walked out to the garden together. I carried a small tray with 2 iced lemonades the staff had left for us. I didn't need to explain what had happened. They already knew. I settled onto the garden bench, the one I liked best, the one with the ivy climbing up its legs and the view of the koi pond just a few yards away. A soft breeze stirred the leaves. Lisa had come all that way for something, control, maybe a confession, a reversal. She left with nothing because I had nothing left to give her. Not guilt, not permission, not even my attention. And the peace I felt in that moment didn't come from winning. It came from the sound of footsteps leaving without an open door behind them. I reached for Gerald's hand and gave it a light squeeze. "I don't think I'm afraid of her anymore," I whispered. He smiled. "That means she's really gone." 2 days later, Gerald called me just after breakfast. "It's time," he said. "You still want to sell the house?" I didn't hesitate. "Yes, He met me an hour later at Golden Pines, a file folder in hand. Inside was the full title deed, my notarized identity verification, and a trust form, blank but ready to protect everything Lisa thought was hers. We sat on the sun porch, papers spread between us. "She's going to come unglued," I said. Gerald smirked. "Let her." Unglued means exposed. I signed line after line, print, initial, signature. Cliff would have teased me for the way my tongue stuck out a little when I focused, but this wasn't just a sale, it was a severing. The house Lisa lived in, claimed, bragged about, it was never hers. She painted the walls, sure, bought a couch with my credit, yes, changed the door knobs, picked out tile, but the bones, the foundation, that was my name. Always had been. We filed the trust paperwork, discreetly transferring the property into the Ruth Langley Irrevocable Living Trust, not because I feared a lawsuit, but because I wanted something ironclad that not even a manipulative daughter could break. Not that by the next day the title had shifted. Lisa wouldn't know yet, but the law would, and I had something else brewing too. With the help of a financial abuse specialist Gerald connected me to, I submitted a request to freeze all transactions tied to my original bank account. Anything processed in the past 6 months would be flagged. The specialist asked if I had backup evidence. "I have 12 pages," I said, handing her the journal documented with dates, details, and withdrawals. She flipped through it, eyebrows rising higher with every page. "You weren't just being used," she said. "You were being harvested." I didn't flinch because I knew, and now so did the law. I returned to Golden Pines with an unusual sense of lightness. Not joy, no, not yet, but there was something like breath in my chest again, like I wasn't holding everything in just to stay polite. Back in my room, I pulled out the envelope Cliff left me the year before he passed. I'd never opened it. It sat at the bottom of my keepsake box, marked in his handwriting, "Only when you're tired of pretending you're okay." I opened it with trembling hands. Inside was a letter, short, just a few lines. "Ruth, if they ever make you feel smaller than the woman I married, don't argue, don't explain, just leave. You don't owe anyone the right to dim your light. Use what's yours and make damn sure they can't take it again." Underneath was a check, uncashed, for $10,000. I stared at it for a long time, then I laughed, a real aching laugh that made my ribs hurt. He knew even then. Cliff had known the world could turn, even family. I called Gerald. "You busy?" I asked. "For you?" "Never." "Then let's sell a house," I said, "and open a trust they can't touch." He paused. "You ready for the fallout?" I looked around my room, the sun streaming in, the koi pond sparkling, my bridge scarf hanging on the chair. "Yes," I said, because this time I'm not reacting. I'm reclaiming. "And that check?" I deposited it that afternoon, not because I needed the money, but because I wanted the world to know I wasn't done building. Lisa always thought she'd get the last word. She counted on it, her voice louder, her texts longer, her threats wrapped in guilt and faux concern. She thought silence was surrender. So when the letter arrived, thick with legal tone and official seals, I imagined she stood in her doorway for a long time before opening it. And when she did, the sound of the lock slamming shut echoed without me ever having to speak. Inside that envelope was the beginning of the end, a formal notification from the trust's legal counsel. Effective immediately, Lisa Andrews is no longer authorized to access any accounts, property, or financial records belonging to Ruth Langley. It was short, professional, fair, no blame, no begging, just boundaries. That's what drove her mad. She called me 7 times that day. I didn't pick up. The 8th time, she left a voicemail. "Mom, this is ridiculous. You're listening to him instead of your own daughter. Do you even understand what you're doing? You're throwing away your family. She used that word like it was armor, like it should have been enough to erase everything she'd done, the pressure, the gaslighting, the theft. But family is an immunity, it's a privilege, and she lost it the moment she poured scalding coffee on my lap and called it my fault. I forwarded the voicemail to Gerald, just in case. Then I did something quiet but powerful. I mailed her nothing. No response, no explanation. I let the letter do what I never could, draw the line with ink and law and consequences she couldn't cry her way out of. Gerald called that evening. She got it, didn't she? Oh, she got it, I said, sipping chamomile from my favorite chipped mug. You can always tell when they realize the power is gone. He laughed. You didn't even flinch. Why would I? I said. I've already buried the version of me that would have explained herself. That night, I slept with the windows open. The air smelled like rain, and in my dreams, I wasn't hiding. I was standing in the middle of that house, my house, holding a set of keys I never gave away. Lisa was nowhere in sight. No yelling, no begging, just echoes. The next morning, I found a small white envelope slipped under my door at Golden Pines, handwritten, no return address. I knew it was her. I didn't open it. I tore it in half and dropped it straight into the shredder at the front desk. Because this time, I wasn't curious. This time, I didn't need to hear her say she was sorry, only to follow it with, but I need. This time, I trusted the silence more than her words, and silence, when chosen, is its own kind of strength. Later that afternoon, Gerald brought over a few papers for me to review, updates to the trust, a list of protected accounts, and a few phone numbers in case I ever needed direct contact with law enforcement or the trust officer. As I signed the last form, he looked up at me. You know, he said, you've done something a lot of people never get to do. What's that? You ended the cycle. Not with a bang, not with a scream, but with a locked door and a clear name. I leaned back in my chair, and for the first time since Cliff died, I let myself believe I'd finally come home to myself. It happened on a Thursday, just after lunch, when the halls of Golden Pines were quiet and the sun had cast that soft golden glow over everything like it always did just before the koi pond lit up. I was sitting on a garden bench with Marjorie, our hands resting on the same folded quilt between us. We had just finished our usual chat about the bridge tournament schedule and how none of the new ladies shuffled properly. Gerald was due to join us soon, and that's when I saw them, Lisa and Travis, walking up the curved brick path that led to the front entrance. Lisa's stride was furious and too fast, Travis lagging behind in that entitled, slouched way that made my stomach turn even before I remembered the $5,000 coffee incident. They were coming for a showdown, but what they didn't know was I had nothing left to lose. The security guard spotted them first, Doris B. Bless her sharp eyes and steady stance, she stepped out from behind the front desk. Before they could even touch the door, I saw Lisa gesture wildly, pointing past Doris toward the back garden. Travis shoved his hands in his hoodie pocket and rolled his eyes. Doris stood firm. I didn't get up, didn't run, didn't even flinch. Marjorie glanced toward the entrance and stiffened. Should I call Gerald? No, I said. Let her see me calm. I wanted Lisa to witness what peace looked like when it wasn't begging for her approval. She finally spotted me through the glass and moved to push past the desk. Doris stepped in. Lisa raised her voice. I couldn't hear the words, but the shape of them was familiar. Rage, desperation, that choking cocktail of control slipping through fingers. Travis finally noticed me too. His eyes met mine, and for a second, I saw it not guilt, not love, but panic. Not because he missed me, but because the money was gone and I wasn't going to be milked anymore. Doris raised a hand, then pointed firmly back toward the parking lot. Lisa threw her arms up. Travis muttered something and turned. First good, let the boy lead for once. Lisa stood there for another moment, arms stiff at her sides, face pale with anger. For the briefest moment, her lips trembled. She mouthed something, Mom, but I didn't move, didn't wave, didn't rise. I stayed right there on that bench, holding Marjorie's hand wrapped in the same quilt Cliff used to drape over my shoulders when I fell asleep on the couch during Jeopardy reruns. They left. I watched until there were small shadows on the driveway, until the engine rumbled and the car pulled away like it hadn't once held my entire life inside it. Marjorie let out a breath. "You didn't even blink." I smiled. "I already said goodbye. They're just now hearing it." Later, Gerald arrived with a bag of scones and a small bouquet of flowers from his garden. I told him what happened. He nodded. "They'll try again." "I know," I said, "but I won't." That night, I wrote in my journal, "When they came with fury, I stayed with peace." That's how you know it's over, when you don't need to yell back. I tore the page out and slipped it into a small frame beside my bed because next time they come looking for a reaction, all they'll find is a reflection of themselves on the other side of a locked door. It arrived 2 days later, a small ivory envelope, hand-addressed, dropped into my Golden Pines mailbox. The handwriting was unmistakable, perfect cursive, just slanted enough to pretend elegance. Lisa's. I stared at it for a full minute, not because I didn't know what it was, but because I did. Marjorie spotted me standing still in the lobby, letter in one hand, coffee in the other. "From her?" she asked. I nodded. "Want me to open it for you?" "No," I said. "I don't need anyone else to see this lie." I didn't open it there. I walked it upstairs, laid it on the small writing desk Cliff used to sit at, and waited until the sun hit the far window, just like it used to when I'd help him with taxes and letters to his war buddies. Then I sat down, took a breath, and opened it. The first word, Mom. Not dear, not I'm sorry, just Mom, like she still had that right. The first paragraph was exactly what I expected. A few shaky attempts at regret, how things got out of hand, how she never meant to make me feel pushed aside, how it all happened so fast. She used the word misunderstanding like a band-aid. Then came the real reason she wrote. Line 3. "We're having a hard time now, bills piling up. Travis didn't qualify for the car loan after all." There it was, the ask like always. The apology was just bait, and I was supposed to swallow it whole because I used to. Because once upon a time, I believed in second chances without proof. But I wasn't the same woman who'd let Lisa rearrange her mail and call it kindness. I wasn't the woman who softened every instinct just to keep the peace. I had made peace with something else now, the fact that not every daughter is a blessing. Some are warnings. The letter ended with, "Maybe we can talk. I really miss you. We all do." I closed the page and stared at the envelope again. It was thick, like she'd enclosed something extra. I reached inside. There it was, a personal check from me, drawn from one of the joint accounts she'd once set up just to help streamline. Uncashed, torn slightly at the corner, $3,500. In the memo, car repairs. I hadn't written it, but my name was printed on it clear as daylight. She must have kept it or forged it or both. I didn't need to know which. All I knew was this wasn't an olive branch. It was bait dangled with a fake tear and a familiar signature. I folded the check in half again, then again until it disappeared in my palm like every false promise she'd ever made. I walked it straight to the shredder. Not a word, not a flinch, just paper turning into dust. I left the envelope open on my desk, let it sit there like a carcass, a reminder that not every letter is meant to be answered. When Gerald came by later that afternoon with his usual lemon cake, he saw it and raised an eyebrow. "She tried again?" I handed him the remaining half of the letter. He read it in silence, then handed it back. "Still thinks you're a mark?" "Not anymore," I said. That night, I didn't journal. I didn't need to because the sentence had already written itself in my head. "I don't care what you meant. What you did was enough." The call came just after dawn. I was up early, watching the koi through the morning mist, a cup of hot water steeping beside me. Gerald's voice was calm but firm. The trust flagged another forged check. Same account, same signature. "But you didn't write it," I said. "I know," I said. "She sent me one last week." There was a pause. "Well," he said, "now the bank knows too." Turns out Lisa had tried one more time to dip into my old accounts, but this time the trust's protective locks snapped shut, and the bank had proof, withdrawals, signatures, emails from her IP address, even a voice message she left for a representative asking what her mother's balance was, as though she still had any right to my name. She wasn't subtle, she was desperate. Gerald continued. The financial abuse specialist filed a report with the Elder Protection Unit. It's being reviewed by investigators as we speak. My chest didn't tighten, it expanded because I finally knew I hadn't just escaped. I'd set the trap. A few hours later, 2 plainclothes officers showed up at Golden Pines, not for Lisa, but for a quiet interview with me. Courteous and gentle, one took notes while the other asked about my records, my journal, the history of withdrawals. I handed them copies of everything, itemized and highlighted. I was ready. When they left, the younger officer said, "You're not the first Mrs. Langley, but you're one of the few who saw it early enough." I almost corrected him. It wasn't early, it was just early enough. By noon, I'd received confirmation that Lisa was under investigation for financial misconduct, elder fraud, and forgery. Travis, too, had been mentioned in at least one flagged transaction. I didn't rejoice, but I didn't mourn either. I sat in the garden and thought about every time she'd told me, "You're lucky to have me," while rearranging my entire life into something that served her. She had always treated me like a locked door she already held the keys to. She never thought I'd change the locks, but I had. Marjorie came by later that afternoon with warm banana bread and 2 mugs of ginger tea. She knew. Everyone at Golden Pines knew by now, not because I told them, but because they watched the storm come and saw me remain seated through it. "Do you think she'll be arrested?" Marjorie asked gently. "I don't know," I said, "and it's not up to me anymore." That's what freedom felt like, not vengeance, distance. Lisa had already lost the one thing she couldn't forge back. Access. Access to me, to my name, to my mind, my life. She didn't just lose money, she lost the game. Because when you gamble on someone's silence and they finally speak, that's the moment you realize you were never winning. Later that night, Gerald and I sat on the back patio under a wide navy sky. He poured us both a small glass of wine and said, "She underestimated you every step of the way." "I underestimated me too," I replied. He raised his glass to recalculating. We clinked, and I said something I hadn't said in years, but knew was finally true. I'm safe, not just from Lisa, but from the need to explain myself to anyone who ever thought my kindness meant surrender. That night, I slept with the window open again, and when the wind picked up, it didn't sound like warning. It sounded like applause.